Welcome to What Nobody Tells You. I'm your host, James Ferrigno. Join me while we explore the truths most people never hear. Welcome to What Nobody Tells You. I'm your host, James Ferrigno, and today we're going to be speaking with Shakara Lyon, author and transformational coach. Welcome, Shakara.
Hi, James. Nice to be here and nice to see you again.
Yeah, nice to see you. It's been a long time.
Oh,
Before we get into your work, can you tell us a little bit about your own journey? About when was the moment you realized that transformation was going to be your journey, guiding
yeah.
other people through transformation?
Well, it's kind of an easy one. It was like when I first found out about death when I was a child, I just thought, no way. There's something that sounds really weird about that. And there was, and I was, like looked around at my parents and my family, and I thought, I've got to do something about. I can't do anything about it. I've got to find out what's going on here. And it's really interesting that set me on my journey of basically self-discovery, seeking some answers. And so that
Mm-hmm.
started very young. And interestingly, my parents died 3 months ago, both of them together within
Mm.
2 weeks. And
Oh.
so I had the opportunity to actually talk to them and tell them what I'd found out. And I also shared with them that they were the motivation for my journey. And so it's kind of interesting that now they've departed, I'm coming out with this little ebook. Remember who the fuck you are. A
Mm-hmm.
badass guide to your eternal self, because that's what I've found out. We're an eternal being having a human experience, a
Mm-hmm.
temporary human experience. That's it.
Mm.
So, yeah, I've been on this quest for since forever.
That's interesting. So, as a transformational coach and someone who works with manifestation, can you tell us what do you think of manifestation as? What is that exactly?
Yeah, well, it's really interesting. I think the one problem that everybody has on the planet is one of mistaken identity, because really we're creators. We are from infinite source. We're a chip off the old block of the creator, made in the image and likeness, so they say.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're creating all the time, but we're creating from a very limited piece of software. And so that, the ego is kind of like taken over driving this badass technological marvel of an avatar.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got, survival software running based
Mm-hmm.
on fear and separation, not the eternal self. And so we're creating a little bit of suffering and misery, I think, as a result of not really knowing who we are and not really knowing what we're doing here. But the moment that we do, we realize, hey, we are creators, we're creating anyway. Let's get conscious about it and let's start creating some good shit, and from a more powerful place. Because it's one thing to think I'm a, skin encapsulated ego who's going to
Mm-hmm.
die, and it's kind of a little bit scary, to thinking I am the eternal self in this badass avatar suit having a 360 fully immersive experience in this this human ride, and going
Mm-hmm.
for it. That's a completely different place to come from. So in
Mm-hmm.
terms of being a manifesting coach, it's a bit of a laugh, really. The main thing that's about is people shifting their identity from an ego to their true self. That's the shift. And I think that anything else is kind of like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. You're not actually driving the ship, you're not driving this avatar, and you don't quite know where you're going. You don't know that you're actually in charge, and a little shift here, a shift here can actually avoid the iceberg.
Mm-hmm. I love that. So we're we're spiritual beings with a spirit inside a body that also has an ego in it. And I've thought a lot about this. How do you look at the relationship between the spirit and the ego, and kind of people look at it in different ways, one evolving into the other or both of them sharing space in this human body? I mean, how do you see that as working?
Yeah, I've got really clear on it recently. And like
Mm,
you, I've spent a lot of time muddling around trying to basically fix a survival software that this avatar of a body has got running. So this is how I
mhm,
see it. Imagine, when you're playing a video game, it spoils the game if you're sitting there and you're just sitting on the couch with a controller. So it
mhm,
also spoils this huge immersive kind of experiential ride if you know you're an eternal being just having human experience. So
mhm,
we kind of like come in with a memory wipe. We forget
mhm.
about all that.
Oh,
We
yeah.
come in for the experience. Like you're putting the headset on, you forget who you are and that, cup of tea's boiling away in the next
Mhm,
room. You forget who you are. So part of the technology is a survival mode, survival software that's really
mhm,
useful, was useful if we thought we're going to get eaten on the savannah, right? Very
mhm,
useful to not being getting out of the way, not being hit by a bus, or remember, useful software. But it seems the software has taken over. It's limited software, and it's like any coded software based on fear and survival. That's what it's going to spew out. So these days, the growl that we hear ain't a tiger that's going to eat us. It's like, uh, I need to have an honest conversation with that person. I want
mhm,
to tell the truth about what's going on in my relationship. I want to change job or change cities. And the ego, the software, the survival software starts to get a little bit fat. No, but what if this happens and what if this happens? And there's
mhm,
all these kind of situations which can put you into like freeze because it's a fear program. It's a survival
mhm,
fear program. It wants you to be careful. So, so I think that the software, which is useful software, I'm not going to make the ego bad, has just
mm,
run away and has got the driver's seat. Now, part of remember who the fuck you are. If you know that that's just your software and what you actually are is an eternal being, then part of waking up, and everybody's talking about awakening. It's all about waking up to what? Right? Waking up to who the fuck you are, that you're an eternal being having a human experience. You're not the ego. Thank you very much for the help, and I'm still going to use you because I'm
mhm,
still here having an experience. And sometimes I need to be careful of this or that and not put my hand in the fire, you know.
mhm,
Um, but it's just gone nuts, and the ego has this 24/7 billboard that flashes notices to us
mhm,
that be careful, watch out. And it uses our sort of like quantum technology to go like a heat-seeking missile. It looks for evidence to back up its program,
mhm,
right? And when you start to wake up a little and have a little bit of distance from that, you can also see the evidence that you're a miraculous, beautiful being, and this is an amazing world, and there's a lot more going on here than you could. There's a lot more going on here. You're a lot more than you could ever, or the ego could ever imagine.
mhm,
Even though the imaginative faculty is part of your actual badass eternal self technology,
mhm,
because part of imagining is part of the whole creative process. We're imagining shit all the time. It's
mhm.
not necessarily stuff that's good for us or good for the world.
Absolutely. I love that. I've been beginning to see there's a lot of, I'll rephrase that. it can be easy to push the ego aside to say, oh no, I don't want to be like that. I don't want to have fear. So I'm going to try to not be in my ego. And I was doing that for a long time. And I more recently realized that the ego is just part of my growth process and part of who I am. So kind of embracing it, taking care of it like a child, really, like having a baby. And that's part of you, and taking care of and holding and making the ego less afraid, helping it be less afraid has been an avenue that's been helpful. Have you found
Yeah,
something
see,
like that?
I don't think the ego is who you are.
Mhm.
That's what I'm saying. I think it's software. I think it's
Mhm.
like a program. And it's based on fear and survival. And
Mhm.
so I think that if you, that's why I say wake up. Who the fuck do you think
Mhm.
you are? That's why it's my question. I think we have a mistaken identity, and I, like you, have tried to make a better personality life, a better egoic life, not be so afraid, more this, not enough that, all the time,
Mhm.
freaking adjusting the dials left, right, and center. And I can honestly say
Mhm.
it hasn't worked. It
Mhm.
didn't work. You know, done the workshop, got the t-shirt, you know, seen the video. It
Mhm.
hasn't worked. And so that's why I feel that a part of the greatest shift that can happen on this planet is actually waking up to who's running the show, who's behind the show, and putting
Mhm.
the eternal self in the driver's seat instead of the ego. Thank you, ego. You've been really useful,
Mhm.
but you are not me, and you're not running the show now.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like just what back to what I was saying about the ego kind of running its kind of
Mhm.
billboards. Because one thing we don't talk about a lot either is we've got two things running simultaneously. We've got all this shit happening on the outside world, and we've got a lot of shit between the ears
Mhm.
happening sometimes too. We don't talk about that. We meet somebody, say, oh, hello, but there's a whole kind of process and all sorts of conversations going on at the time. So being mindful, and there's a lot in spiritual traditions also about being mindful. For a start, it's just realizing that you have this internal kind of dialogue going on. You have things going on in the outside, and you know what? You're actually neither. You're actually what's behind witnessing this whole thing.
Mhm.
Important distinction. And one of the things I love about spiritual traditions that have been trying to tell us things, about who we are and how to sort of like get a little bit of a glimpse of our eternal nature. They've been telling us for thousands of years, right?
Yeah.
But we're not going to be going and hanging out for 40 years in a cave and around with our begging bowls and that. But neuroscience scientists and quantum physics have been helping out a lot, and they're converging. And so quantum physics is saying, hey, there's an observer happening. And the observer changes also even the nature of our very white coat experiments. And so, science, neuroscience, quantum physics, and spiritual traditions are coming closer and closer together and giving us the opportunity for a new view on reality. And part of that, I have to laugh about this, like,
Mhm.
if I was a high school teacher for some years, and I basically just became a high school teacher because I just wanted to control kids because I was sick of being controlled myself, right? So anyway, that's another story. But if sitting in my desk at school that I was told that my desk is basically vibrating particles, it's not really physical, it's mainly space, it's condensed light on some level, and that I was sitting there in and a kind of like with an avatar kind of, and like I wasn't even seeing reality. Like even looking at the teacher, there's electrical impulses happening that come and flick around and go do this upside down thing, and my brain interprets this. That's what's really going on. I'm actually not seeing what I think I'm seeing. And also, for thoughts we have, when I have a thought, I draw air up from my lungs, vibrates my vocal cords, and a vibration goes out and hits you on the other side of the room. And that goes and registers in the eardrums of somebody, and 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 I can also, through my vibration, through my sound, through what I'm saying, create a chemical dump in another avatar's body. Because if I'm saying mean stuff, can create a process where there's certain chemicals get released, and if inside my own avataric body as well, and I can also think positive, beautiful thoughts like gratitude, and all of a sudden chemicals are released, and I'm experiencing like I'm in a luxury spa. So, yeah, back to school. Yeah, the desk isn't physical. I'm not even really seeing the teacher. I'm sending out sort of vibrations. I got whole chemical dumps going on. The more that science goes deep and really looks at what's going on here, the closer we get to realizing, wow, this is a very sophisticated piece of equipment. And there's, oh, here's another thing I just absolutely love. You know, they cannot find consciousness in the brain. It doesn't matter how many experiments they do, dissecting and little bits of grain, it's not there. We're outside the whole experience. You know, like, you know, the great Hermetic principle, you know, all is mind, all is consciousness. And do you know what? I
Mm-hmm.
love it. That that's what science is saying now.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, that's fantastic. And yeah, my understanding is that consciousness is all there is in this reality.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. So what happens, you know, like what happens when you actually realize that? And sort of so much shifts also when you accept and look at death slash the end of this temporary experience as like a game set and match on a wild ride. And if your consciousness, that means that it's not hard then to see that your consciousness, continuity of consciousness, will continue when the avataric suit falls away. So instead of being identified with this, and so that every line and wrinkle and you know when your body, you know, isn't it, it's funny then about the whole aging process. It's funny, you know, it's all going to sag and drop off, right? And so it's just going to slip away instead of being so identified with it and so afraid. Because if you think you're this, you're afraid that's going to be the end. Well, what if you're not this and it's not the end? How's that going to change things? It's going to
Mm-hmm.
change things completely.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I want to back up a little bit. You were talking about the ego and how it's a program and it's running fear, essentially. I'm wondering how do you approach that? Like if somebody's having a lot of fear, like what is just how do you approach, or what would you say to someone who's having lots of anxiety or lots of fear going on? What would be the thing to do to deal
Okay,
with
I
that?
think I'm going to jump in. I think that under pretty much the majority of fears is actually fear of death, fear of annihilation. Fear is, you can say it's, oh, I'm not good enough. No, exactly. I'm not enough. No, I'm no one. No, I'm not. It's, I think, an understanding that the underlying fear that's coming out in various forms can track back to, I'm going to die. I
Mm-hmm.
remember somebody having a conversation with me once, and I wish that I'd recorded it. But he went through and showed me in that moment that even the fact of me driving to the supermarket to go
Mm-hmm.
get food, behind all that is the kind of like the thought that if I don't go and get food, well, I'm not hunting and gathering these days. If I don't go and get food, I'm going to die. Everything, I can't remember now, but it was everything
Hmm.
was, I'm going to die. So if you can actually look fear right in the eyes and say, okay, you can pull up various aspects, various billboards, uh, but basically fear is at, the root of all of them. If I looked at, if I look the fear of death, which is kind of the big baddie, right in the eyes and say, you don't exist. It's not true. If I can pop that one, the rest is going to unravel and it becomes a lot just interesting and then not so interesting and it just unravels.
Hmm.
But I think quite often we're sitting around with all these fears on top of the big one.
Hmm.
Um, and that's why, in my book, remember who the fuck you are. A
Hmm.
bad ass guide to your eternal self. I've just kind of got that last bit in there. Um, it solves just about everything. It solves just about every problem that we have at a very fundamental level. And it flips a switch so that we can actually start playing with the game instead of kind of being afraid of it or trying to move it or trying to sort of like make it better, try to fix things. I don't need fixing. You do not need fixing. A mind basically just to remember who you are isn't fixing. It's just a sort of like remembrance. And it makes sense. It was curious before. How come if we are something else, there's a great eternal being, or I've lived before, or whatever, why can't I remember? Well, you come in, you have a memory wipe because you come in starting fresh to play the game in a unique, fresh way. And I think that the whole idea of the game is to wake up inside it, to remember who you are, and then go next level, like in a game, and starting to create like the badass creator that you actually are. Yeah, it's just a whole new level of the game.
Hmm. Yeah, I like that. What?
This is how I've dealt with it. Like I'm it's I all is consciousness, continuity of consciousness. I am not I'm no longer identified with this. Like whether I've just bought my own bullshit or whether I'm actually just just looking around. I'm looking around and saying, oh my God, what spiritual traditions have been saying, what science is saying, and do you know what? What makes sense to me? I can run it through my filter because, like, I go back to my 10-year-old child, something didn't feel right, something didn't make sense. I couldn't believe it that I was going to die, and now I don't believe it. I'm catching up with, we're all catching up with what the world is actually saying back to us now, what whether it's science or spiritual traditions, like I'm saying, or just the feeling that you have inside, like the same Shakara that's been looking out of my 5-year old eyes, my 15 and 50. And I'm kind of like step back even behind that and say, well, what is the consciousness looking out of those eyes having this experience and identifying more with that, not with the avatar that's got another wrinkle or a grey hair that I have to worry about. I think it's like with consciousness, the consciousness that's driving behind the whole show, the consciousness that's creative and orchestrating, not just my world or this world, but I'm saying the universes. One of the things I did for a while was I worked as a past life therapist. And wow, that was fascinating. I did it for 2 years. It sort of sprung out of rebirthing breath therapy. And now that we're into a really interesting thing, if we're going to talk about the breath, you're talking about spirit. Breath and spirit have the same kind of names in some, like Vedic traditions and things like that, right? So, so working as a past life therapist, I started doing it because when I was doing very rigorous rebirthing, like breath therapy, I'd started to have spontaneous past life recall. Now, on one hand, you could say, well, that's just stories that are coming up on a screen, on my inner screen. But they're fascinating stories, and they're stories where I was kind of like really in the experience. And whenever, and very, very relative to some of the experiences that I was having now. So when I became a past life therapist, started doing regressional work. I used the breath, circulation, conscious, connected breathing, and we'd ask the consciousness in there what particular question they had, very specifically. I always remember one woman who came in. She walked into the room, and the first thing she said was, "Hello, I'm an atheist." Oh, okay, all right, okay. And it wasn't anything to do with why she'd come. She said, "I'm an atheist," and her question was about allergies she was having, very tangible physical symptoms. So anyway, we did a regression, and so I was asking, to go into a consciousness and to bring forth some information, past life information, specifically about why she was having these allergies. So anyway, she ended up going into back to the scene of the crucifixion. And she was describing to him, Jesus is up on the thing, and the Mary's there, and the thing's happening, and whatever. She's got tears rolling down her face, and it was an amazing session. So she came out of it, and then she was like, gave it herself, and she said, "But I came here for my allergies." That was amazing. "But I came here for my allergies," and she kind of like left. And I thought, wow, I usually have a 100% hit rate in terms of asking consciousness to go back into the records and to bring up certain reasons for certain patterns or experiences that I'm experiencing now based on past lives, past lives. And anyway, she called me 2 weeks later and said, I don't have allergies anymore. Gone. I've been shaking carpets and doing this. She said, I didn't believe in anything. I didn't believe in myself. I didn't believe in anything anybody was telling me. So somehow going back into an experience, now it was just something that got thrown up, and it was just it's what gets thrown up. So I'm, the whole past life thing, I just know it's thrown up in consciousness. I know that. So we say, well, have you lived before? Open. But all of those things made me feel as if that I had more experiences on earth than just this one. And that there was, part of that whole thing, there's a divine plan, there's some orchestration. This is not chaos. There's no way this whole thing here is chaotic or random. It's even science has got that down. There's just no way. There's major design here. And so the more that you actually wake up to that, to the fact that everything's consciousness, all is mind, and get a little bit back in the driver's seat of it all, then there's a tram going on the outside. Then you get a little bit of distance. You start to identify more with that, less with this, and the whole death of the body thing becomes a little silly. Near-death experiences, you could have a peak experience, DMT, ayahuasca, or shamanic journeys, something happens. Yeah. Near-death experiences are pretty interesting. But I mean, it's another whole topic, but I've actually written a longer book. Um, it was I started out or started writing about 4 years ago. Who am I? Awakening your immortal self. So that tracks my whole journey, various peak experiences, some of the things that I've done that actually woke me up. Um, and I just decided to just cut with all that. I will be publishing that soon, maybe by the end of the year. But I decided to take everything that I've learned and put it into this small book, which essentializes the whole trip, and that is just remember who the fuck you are. You're you know, you're a consciousness, um, infinite consciousness, undivided consciousness, having experience of being separated and playing out in this multiplayer game. And a totally kick-ass, multi-sensory, you're a self-aware biological suit. You know, it's as I was finishing this book, I was, as you do, I flicked on to a podcast with Donald Hoffman, and he's neuroscientist. There's a many of them, and he was talking about avatar headset, da da da, because what he was saying is he's been studying neuroscience with his very intelligent buddies, science buddies, for the last 40 years, and he's arrived at this whole notion that we're not this, but we're driving it, and to getting in touch with what's driving the consciousness that's driving it. So it's very encouraging, and I do think it's a quick. I like things quick. This is kind of like the the quickest way to kind of get what we're doing here is to have an identity shift from identifying with the ego and the body and the limited temporary vehicle to the undivided consciousness, who's eternal, who's actually having the experience. Like we've forgotten that we're somebody who's wearing the costume. We're not the costume. Yeah, well, we've kind of got lost in it. It's understandable because, I thought, it like it, but it looks different when we know we're driving it, and start to, this is where I start to feel grateful, and even grateful for the ego. Oh, I have a little tear for the ego, for the survival software, for all the ways that it would actually help us navigate the world and have an experience here. But I'm not that happy with the ego, the way that it seems to have got out of hand. It's got a whole network of distractions happening out there in the world. Like even, our phones and everything is a distraction. And in a fear survival program, if there can be conjured up real reasons to be afraid, oh my God, how many times I've stopped looking at end of the world scenarios. I thought, oh my God, here's another distraction. The ego loves it, pumps it up. They're coming through and urgent messages and calls and whatever. And what is it distracting you from? It's distracting you from your real self and from knowing, first of all, that the ego's got its program running. That's what it's doing. Distracting you from your real self that isn't any of that. And also, it would come back to that, the greatest fear is fear of death. I mean, I don't know how many movies I've seen, how many programs, how many ways do we get presented with ways to die? It's even our entertainment. It's the ego's entertainment. Look, another way to die, another few cars blowing up. And it's getting grislier and grislier and grislier because the distractions have to be more. They have to be more gruesome because it's trying to hold our attention so that we don't actually realize that that's all bullshit and that's not who we are. It's dark. It's very, it needs to be If you see that's the ego getting desperate, if you see that there's a desperation factor, a distraction factor, oh, you can actually sit back from it all. Otherwise, because it's trying to pull you in. And so there's that little bit, spiritual practice of just like watch it. Just have a look at it. And you start to look at that. Oh, I wonder why that's going on. But it's it's just like the ego or the trying really hard to pull you back into its program. Well, it's interesting you get onto black magic because what is a broadcast? It's mass casting of spells. What is a spell? It's words, right? Repetitive words broadcast through television, right? Through television. And to kind of like draw us in. It's like a mass. It is. And so you can see that whoever is actually programming these things, they're trying to program us. But you can tell that whoever's driving those things is not really coming from a good place. And more are trying to go for our teenagers and our kids' minds because there are some real good magicians on this planet that have worked out the whole manifesting thing. They've worked out the word consciousness and they play with it. We're taught spelling at school, but we're not taught what spelling actually is. It's combinations of words that have a certain vibration and frequency, and there they go pumping out, broadcast out to the masses. And when you see that, and that's part of the waking up is just seeing what it's up to, then you're not at the mercy of it. Fear. It's all, if you look at it, it's fear programming. Fear. Literally programs. They're programming. And this is, if we don't kind of like wake up and sort of like remember who we are as creators, then those that do know they're creators and do know that basically we're consciousness and can be manipulated. We can be manipulated. If we don't start to like remembering that and looking at the things that are happening in the world and just seeing through it, then it's kind of it's getting a little getting out of hand. It's out of control. And but the other thing too is it's getting out of the ego's control, because if the ego has a sort of like a power, a sort of like a survival thing, it's trying to control to keep the driver's seat. It wants to sort of like push for you to do this and not do this and do this and this, buy this, and you need this and you need this for your wrinkles and you need this. It's kind of gone mad. And it's like the world's gone mad, the ego has really gone mad. It's really taken over. But I think that part of remembering who the fuck you are puts you back in the driver's seat. Like, I'm a little being having this human experience, right? And I'm an immortal, right? And so now I know that. What are we going to create with it? And well, a better world, And also, it's not really. I'm not into the whole notion of the ego just setting up a new campaign and going to save the world because because of how terrible it is. We're going to do this and we're going to do that. I see that as a little bit of a distraction as well. I think save yourself first. Oxygen mask on first. Yeah. Remember who you are. Take that off. Now the world's going to be here after we go. It's been here for a long time, but let's just try and leave it better than we, leave it better than than it is now, for sure. But I think one of the ways of doing that is by waking up inside the game, inside this avatar suit, and realizing we're creators, and then starting to create some really good. Here's the other thing. You said together, like there's only one of us. That's another thing that really fucks with the ego's program. because it runs the whole idea of fear and survival based on the fact that we're separate and there's scary things out there that we needed to be afraid of or protected from. There's only one of us, one multi-players, and behind your eyes and my eyes, there's the same consciousness looking out. And, in peak experiences, it could be like, shamanically induced or that, or in the depths, the throes of lovemaking, when the mask drops, the costume drops, and all of a sudden you're sort of in a more of like a space where you're contacting true self. Like I heard when I was younger, true love is when you can look into the eyes of the beloved and see yourself looking back at you. And so sometimes we have these experiences where, like bodies disappear and we're just in an experience, and they're usually ecstatic because that's what home tastes like. That's what home feels like when the separation, however it happens, when separation falls away, the costume falls away, and you start really seeing the reality of things. They're usually quite ecstatic experiences because that's the nature of us. Like 22 years old, I was lucky enough to have a spontaneous Kundalini awakening. I found out it was in the Himalayas. So basically, it was a peak experience where slipped into like timelessness, just ecstasy in every cell of my body, like thousands of times more than a physical orgasm or something. So, and it was like merging with the ocean, with God, and I saw myself as an individual point of consciousness within a sea of consciousness. So I was lucky enough to have that experience, that vantage point, and then I'm trying to understand it. So I don't know what was that, right? But what I understand is that any kind of peak experience, however that happens, when you start to taste the ecstasy, you're getting closer to your true nature, and it feels so good because it's home. Well, now I'm sitting here, I'm at the spearhead. It's just like it is all about mistaken identity and real change. That's a mic drop. That's it. Because like I was saying before, otherwise it's like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic, and I don't like this whole idea of creating a different version of yourself out of the bits and pieces of the ego's world. Because if there's not some fundamental change in the identity, and you're taking the driver's seat back in, it's you're heading for the iceberg. And I mean, let's face it, I've tried it, you've tried it, we've all tried it, I'm not going to get to understanding myself and to creating the kind of world that I not just want for myself, but for the planet by positive affirmations that are trying to be bigger than the ego's flashing billboard inside my mind. Now, the thing about the ego's billboard, you're not enough, you're this and that, you're going to die, what's that? Is that it uses your own voice to hit you over the head. That's a betrayal. That's a real betrayal, right? This voice round and round and round and round. I'm not going to just bring in a louder voice that's going to try and talk that voice down, because it's really got a grip. So what I'm going to do is just put that voice in its correct place. Oh, this is my ego software. I'm not that. I'm way bigger than that. Boom. And then you start to see it for what it is, like you seeing the television programming for what it is. You're not in it. You're not in it. And it's just like, not mistaking the costume to who's actually wearing it. Well, I'd say, I'd do what you just said, but a step before that is see through it for what it is, that it's masking a fear of death. Have a little bit of a smile with it, and if the program's still running, move through it anyway, because you actually know that's not true. It only helps to me to understand, well, then what is real? And it's like, what is it? What are you replacing that with? Well, true self, remembering who you really are, and not the program that's running telling you that you're something that you're not. Yeah, it's really helped me to see the ego as a program, and it's a program based on fear and survival, and it runs separation full on. It's, if because if you take, if I mean, for the ego to say that there's only one of us is it just completely fucks with its fuses on that one, because its whole thing is set up around competition and me versus you, and I've got to get somewhere, and I'm not enough compared to this, and that there's all this sort of like this kind of referencing. But if there's only one of us, and I see that everyone around me is just me in another costume trying to wake up to remember, and they're all got different flavors and facets, then I can be curious about playing with them. And there's a in my book, I do these little 60-second rememberings, invitations to remember at the end of each chapter, and I call it between the breaths. And there's a reason for that, because kind of consciousness is something that is like between breaths, that point between breaths where you're just in pure witness. So anyway, so one of the things I do is say, okay, take someone you love, take somebody, look, imagine somebody you love, imagine somebody who triggers you, and see them in front of you. Close your eyes, see them in front of you, bring them up. And then imagine that you're all taking your headsets off simultaneously. And just feel the experience. What does that feel like? What is that? How's that different from actually seeing them and their, somebody you love, somebody you're triggered by? And it's actually something you can do, because you're entering into also kind of like a real experience of really how it is when you take off all the conditioning and the programming and the separate sleuth gadget that's given us this amazing, separation game. You take all that off, and what you've got is just consciousness with consciousness. It's kind of beautiful and simple, because it is this simple.
So the way I've been experiencing reality is I'm intuitively aware that the whole universe is one thing, and actually outside of the universe as well. But I do feel like there's the level of, say, planet Earth feels like kind of a sub thing, which is also a oneness that I feel a little more connected to. And that the human race is kind of another sub oneness that I feel even more connected to. But that I'm at the same time an individual.
Oh.
And though I feel like a connection and a oneness with all other people, I also do feel a separateness and an individuality. And I've kind of looked at it like, it's kind of a matter of perspective for me. It's like
Mm.
the drop becomes the ocean becomes the drop kind of thing. How do you look at that?
Yeah, I think we've come for that experience, but and now we're kind of like riding the waves, knowing you,
Mm-hmm.
and at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
one of them,
Mm-hmm.
and max it. And I really want to know what life will look like in my life, your life, planetary life, family, or the whole thing, when everybody knows.
Mm.
Or maybe this is a place that we come to for the immersive experience, a little bit
Mm-hmm.
calm, and that there's that way of, and maybe souls just kind of like, I don't know, maybe they sort of
Yeah.
like get spiral through here, and
Mm-hmm.
it'd be like terrifying, a little bit like I always remember my life was so crazy in my 30s. I was saying all the time, my life's more scary than going on a roller coaster. And I would never at that point go on a roller coaster. But I just parked, I went and bought a ticket for that roller coaster. I sat in the chair and I went for the ride and I sat there, and honestly, it was just like sitting in my lounge at home, right? Because it's true, my life was just so spinning, right? But we came for the full experience, the full experience of James, the full experience of Shakara. And I feel, more optimistic than I ever have, in terms of just my own personal. I really want to be part of that, and to see creating with other avatars, with other different expressions of the one self, of myself, what we do here. What are we going to do? Let's play.
Yeah.
But let's make sure we play.
Yeah. Yeah. That's how I've looked at it, as embodiment is just being here and learning who you are, and then really figuring out what you're supposed to be doing and then doing it.
Yep. And so like I feel as if more than ever that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And that is just waking up and talking about it.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you having me on to do just that.
My pleasure. And before we go, or do you have any words you'd like to leave the people with? Maybe something that they can do that I read your book, of course, maybe some help
Yeah.
them in their daily lives.
Yeah, I'd say like act as if is one of those Hermetic principles.
Mm-hmm.
Act as if you are a eternal being having a human experience. Act as if you are, and just starting to sort of like make that 2-degree shift of like the Titanic away from the iceberg, right? You've had plenty of experience of acting as if you're the ego and acting as if you're a separate. So you've done that one, right? Why don't you act as if you're a divine being having a human experience? And that means that you're looking the fear game. You're looking at fear and the whole death game, and what you see, all the various ways of that everything's trying to make you feel afraid. You're looking at that squarely in the eyes, saying, that's not me. I'm acting as if I'm an immortal being having a human experience, and then see how that changes your life, your the game and your ride.
Fantastic. Yeah, might as well see what happens.
Nothing to lose.
Yeah. Yeah, nothing to lose. Might as well try it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Shakara.
My pleasure.
Thanks for spending this time with me on What Nobody Tells You. If you found this helpful, please subscribe and follow so you don't miss any future episodes. For new episodes and updates, you can also join on Substack email list, and there's a link in the description. And you can contact me for emotional awareness coaching if you feel so drawn. Take care, and I'll see you in the next episode. Hi, guys. If you could like, subscribe, follow, share, that way I can help bring you more information and better podcasts in the future. Thanks.